Hello, I'm Molly, and this is Care Experts, brought to you by CareCredit and Pets Best. Together, the CareCredit credit card and Pets Best pet health insurance provide all the financial tools that can help you be the best pet parent you can be. Today, we are here with Dr. Dawn LeHoullier from Countryside Veterinary Clinic in Jefferson, Oregon. Hi, Dr. Dawn. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you, and we're going to be talking about a very important issue today, which is spaying and neutering. We're going to get all kinds of questions for you.
I look forward to it.
So let's start with the basics. What is the difference between spaying and neutering?
So there's a really minor difference. Neutering, surprisingly, can actually refer to either spaying or quote unquote neutering. Neutering referring to becoming sexually neuter. So we're removing the testicles in the case of the male or the uterus and ovaries in the case of the female, whereas spaying refers specifically to the female.
I see. And why is it important that we spay or neuter our cats and dogs?
Well, one big issue is population control. If people are letting their animals have puppies or kittens and they're not finding homes, that can be an issue. But there also can be some health benefits to spaying and neutering, as well as eliminating those secondary characteristics that maybe are undesirable. While marking is a learned behavior, the male and the female that are sexually intact are more likely to mark because they're either trying to find a mate or they're trying to establish that territory where a mate can come into. And so sometimes we don't like those behaviors, and while they are learned, and so even a spayed or neutered animal can still learn how to mark, we can start to maybe reduce that behavior.
And what age is appropriate to spay or neuter our cats?
So for cats, the latest research is actually showing that we spay or neuter them by the time they're 5 months of age. So anytime, up to that point. In my practice, what we tend to do is when they're getting their last set of kitten vaccines, they're also getting spayed or neutered on that day as well. And so we're kind of wrapping it all into the same visit. And so then it's just done. And a lot of the reason for that is that those animals are not really sexually mature yet. So there's not really a chance that they can have kittens at that point.
That makes a lot of sense. And as far as dogs go, is it the same age? Is it different for dogs to be spayed and neutered?
So it's a little bit different for dogs. It's actually a very evolving thing right now. In the last 12 to 18 months, there's been a lot of new research coming out showing that some of the larger breeds and some of the new recommendations are that the large and giant breeds are actually fixed or spayed or neutered after they're 12 months of age. And so we're actually pushing that time back. A lot of the toy breeds, the small breeds, medium breeds, we're actually looking at staying, around that 6-month mark. But again, this is a rapidly evolving area, and so there's a lot of newer research coming out, and so things are changing a little bit on the canine side.
And in that new research, do breeds play a part? Like, does the breed of the dog play a part? You said size, but also does the breed matter in when you should neuter or spay?
Maybe not necessarily breed. I mean, yes, breed in terms of like a Great Dane is going to be a giant breed. I mean, it just is. You're not going to probably see a 10-pound mature Great Dane, but so yes and no, but really more the size, really more their adult weight. And so, we're looking kind of in that 50 to 60 pound range and bigger. And so that encompasses a lot of dogs. The kind of difference to that is some of these animals, especially the females that are becoming more mature, they're more likely to have their first heat cycle by the time they're a year. And that first heat cycle does predispose them to mammary cancer later in life. So there's a little bit of, like I said, it's very evolving. And so, but the current research is the current recommendation is being to fix those larger breeds after 12 months of age.
Thank you. And how long does it take for my pet, dog or cat, to heal after they've been spayed or neutered?
So it takes about 10 to 14 days for that incision to heal. once they're healed, they can go right back to doing their normal things. And so running, jumping, playing, it's just that initial 10 to 14 day period post-operatively that everything's healing, and we want to restrict their activity. So we don't want them to run, jump, play. If they like to get up on the bed, it's carrying them, getting them up on the bed, manually taking them down off the bed, because stretching, moving those tissues around can cause disruption in the healing process. And so it can either prolong healing, or it can cause dehiscence of one or more of those suture lines. And then that's a whole other issue there. But 10 to 14 days to get healed, then they can go right back to regular life.
And it sounds like a close monitoring so you don't prolong that healing.
Yeah, we don't want it to take any longer. They don't want to have to be restricted in activity any longer than they have to. And we don't want to have to keep them restricted any longer than we have to.
Absolutely. And is there anything as a pet owner that I could do to help my animal while they're healing? I mean, you mentioned, obviously caring for them, making sure they don't, rip anything open or have a problem, but is there anything else that I can do to help soothe their pain while they're healing?
Giving them the most likely probably an anti-inflammatory post-operatively, that's very important. A lot of these pets, they bounce right back and they don't want to show pain. And so they don't like to show pain even when they are in pain. And so I can't imagine, I've never had abdominal surgery, but if I had an abdominal procedure, I would want something afterwards. I can imagine they would too. So when the doctor sends home a prescription post-operatively, making sure to give it. Even if they look like they're doing just fine, not only will it help them be more comfortable, it'll help them rest more, but it will also help them heal faster. Reducing the inflammation at the surgical site will speed healing, because inflammation is anti-healing. It interrupts the healing process, and we can actually push it to a longer healing time. More healing means more restriction, means more discomfort. If we can shorten that period of time, we can get them back on their feet, so to speak, get them back to their normal life.
That's great advice. And for those concerned pet owners, is the surgery risky?
There's a risk anytime we're messing with body systems. And so anesthesia, surgical procedure, although those risks in almost every patient, especially if we're talking young spays and neuters, or these animals that are 6 months, 12 months, 13, 14 months, the risks are incredibly low. And so anesthesia has come a long way in the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, we have these agents that have minimal effect on body. They're not having to be metabolized in the body. We're having all these things, our surgical techniques are perfected pretty well, that we can do. We have a lot of ways surgically to minimize the risk of bleeding or complication during procedure. And we're monitoring these pets. I mean, these pets are monitored from the time they're sedated, through anesthesia, through surgery, and then through the recovery period until they go home. And so we're always watching them, always trying to make sure there's not going to be a complication. And if there is, try to curtail it before it really becomes an issue.
Yes, definitely. And do our dogs and cats behave differently after they're spayed or neutered?
It can have a mild change in behavior, but that behavioral change that we tend to see tends to be maybe intersex aggression. So females being aggressive with other females, or males being aggressive with other males, tend to happen more in the sexually intact animals. And so once we spay or neuter them, that behavior can be eliminated or at least decreased.
And you mentioned that female dogs, they come into their first heat around 1 year old. Is it the same for cats?
Yeah, I've personally seen animals in heat as young as almost 4 months of age, which is very abnormal. And sometimes it's not till after a year. And so each female is a little bit different, but on average, the first heat cycle tends to happen between that 6-month mark and 12-month mark.
So, Dr. Don, I've heard it said that for our female cats and dogs, you should wait until they have their first heat cycle to then spay or neuter. Has that advice changed? Is there any new information out there?
So the latest information for cats is showing, they're calling it fixed by 5. And so what that basically means is by the time they're 5 months, these patients should be spayed or neutered. There doesn't seem to be that correlation, at least in female cats, between types of cancers and the first heat cycle.
Thank you, Dr. Don LeHoullier, for giving us all of your insights on spaying and neutering. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
More episodes of Care Experts can be found at carecredit.com/careexperts. All of our featured Care Experts recommend and accept the CareCredit credit card, which is accepted at hundreds of thousands of provider locations nationwide. For more information on how Pets Best Pet Insurance can cover up to 90% of your pet's unexpected eligible veterinary expenses, visit petsbest.com. Or for more information on the CareCredit credit card, go to carecredit.com.
Thanks for joining us on Care Experts with CareCredit. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with friends and family. And stay tuned for new episodes every week. All information, opinions, and recommendations discussed in this episode are for your information only. We believe the information sources are generally reliable, but because of possible human or mechanical error by the sources, Synchrony or its affiliates, including CareCredit, does not provide warranty to the accuracy, quality, or completeness of the information or any results obtained from it. Any statement or opinions in this episode are the doctor's alone, and included data was current to the time of creating this episode. Please consult your own advisors before using any of this information. Pet insurance coverage offered and administered by Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC, is underwritten by American Pet Insurance Company, a New York insurance company headquartered at 6100 4th Avenue South, Suite 200, Seattle, Washington, 98108, or Independence American Insurance Company, a Delaware insurance company located at 11333 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 160, Scottsdale, Arizona, 85254. Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC, California Agency Number 0F37530, is a licensed insurance agency located at 10840 Ballantine Commons Parkway, Charlotte, North Carolina 28277. Each insurer has sole financial responsibility for its own products. Please refer to your declarations page to determine the underwriter for your policy. Terms and conditions apply. See your policy for details.